They say you don't remember the moment your life changes. I do. I remember the rustle of my two large sweater sleeves as I waited, 10 years old but small enough to still fit into the chair they used for the preschoolers. I remember the hum of the orphanage's fluorescent lights and the uncertain hush that always settled when a visitor arrived. The air turned still, expectant, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Then she walked in. Katie. Her name would come to mean everything to me, but that first time it was just the way she stood, confident, warm, out of place in our grayness. She wore a navy trench coat and soft leather gloves, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail that swayed with every step. She looked like something from another world. A better world. I ran to her. I didn't think. I just knew. Somewhere in my chest, it clicked into place, like recognizing a long-lost song. Other children hung back, cautious. Not me. I wrapped my arms around her waist like I'd known her forever. She laughed, surprised but not pulling away, and said quietly, "Well, hello there." By the end of the visit, I had a family. She picked me. Out of all the others. There was no hesitation in her voice, no second glances. Katie filled out the forms that afternoon, and 2 months later I was in her car with a purple backpack and the first real coat I ever owned. She wasn't married then, just 30, full of ambition and warmth. Her house was modest but smelled like vanilla and fresh cotton. She painted one of the bedrooms pale yellow for me and filled the closet with clothes I didn't even dare imagine were mine. It was all new, so wonderfully new. But the best part wasn't the material things. It was the way she sat with me after nightmares and brushed my hair while I told her about the dragons that lived under my bed. It was the quiet talks we had over cocoa when I didn't want to sleep. It was that she looked at me like I mattered. I never called her Katie for long. Within weeks, it was Mom. From the outside, we were close, closer than most. I adored her. Worshipped her, maybe. I wanted to be like her. And in those early years, the lines between parent and best friend often blurred. She treated me not just as a child but as a person. She explained things patiently. She respected my thoughts. She told me I was special. She made me believe it. I was 14 when things shifted. It happened on a blistering July afternoon. We'd spent the day lounging near the pool in our backyard, our towels spread out like lazy flags over the lawn chairs. I still remember how the sun turned her skin to bronze and lit up every strand of her chestnut hair. She wore a simple black swimsuit, elegant, understated. But to me, she looked radiant. Untouchable. We laughed too long and played too hard. And then the water fight happened, me chasing her with a plastic cup, her shrieking, splashing, dripping wet. She tossed her head back and let the spray hit her face, smiling without restraint. Something fluttered in my stomach. Not butterflies, no. Something more complicated. More secret. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image of her, hair slicked down, eyes bright, and something in me knew I had never liked anyone the way I liked her. Not a crush. Something deeper. Forbidden, terrifying, but electric. I shoved the feeling down so hard it made my ribs ache. She didn't notice at first. She was too busy being Mom, packing my lunch, texting me reminders about my dentist appointment, braiding my hair before school. She didn't see the way I stared at her when she passed in her bathrobe or how I flinched when her hand brushed mine at the grocery store. But I knew. And that knowledge sat in my chest like a secret flame. Years passed and I got better at hiding it. Smiling, nodding, playing the part of the grateful daughter. But the feeling never went away. It grew roots. Then came the day everything broke open. She came home early from work, furious, her heels clacking like gunfire on the tile. She slammed her purse on the counter, chest rising fast. Her cheeks flushed with more than just heat. "Katie," I said quietly from the couch. She looked up, startled, like she hadn't realized I was there. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "It's Mark," she said through clenched teeth. He said I was dressing too provocative for the office. That I'd distract people. That my clothes were inviting. Can you believe that? She wasn't asking. She was breaking. I stood and crossed to her without thinking. "He's an idiot." She gave a half-laugh, half-sob. "Maybe he's not wrong. Maybe I should stop trying so hard." "No," I said firmly. "You're beautiful. And some people can't handle that. Not men. Not even girls. Her eyes widened just slightly. I stepped closer, and before I could talk myself out of it, I kissed her. Soft. Just a brush of lips. Not urgent. Not lustful. Just real. Her breath caught and she froze. I pulled back immediately. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't know why I. She didn't speak. Just turned and walked silently to the bathroom. I sat on the couch, heart pounding like a war drum. My mind raced with shame, with fear, with a million scenarios. She'd hate me. She'd send me away. Call a therapist. Tell her friends. It would be over. But when she came back, hair damp, robe clinging to her skin, she stopped in the doorway. Looked at me. And kissed me back. Just once. She didn't say a word. But everything shifted in that moment. The secret had been named. And nothing was ever going to be the same. After that kiss, the world felt altered. Not dramatically. No crashing thunder, no sudden proclamations. Just the subtle disorientation of stepping into a room where everything has been rearranged slightly. Not enough to be obvious, but enough that you feel it in your bones. Katie didn't talk about it. 4 days, she moved around the house as if nothing had happened. She folded laundry. She made chicken piccata. She asked about my homework. But I knew better. I saw the way her eyes lingered just a little longer on my face when I spoke. How her fingers trembled slightly when she passed me a cup of tea. There was a softness behind every glance, a wariness too, as if afraid of what might come next. So I waited. I didn't press, didn't bring up the kiss. But inside me, something was blooming, slow and irrepressible. For years, I had buried that part of myself beneath layers of gratitude, of daughterhood, of societal rules. Now it stirred like a seed catching its first ray of light. 2 weeks later, she called in sick to work. We spent the day at home, curled up on the couch in silence, watching old movies. I remember Roman Holiday playing in black and white, her arm brushing mine every time she reached for her tea. I didn't say a word, but I felt the electricity crackle every time our skin met. When the credits rolled, I turned to her. Katie. She didn't look at me. Don't, she whispered. Please. Don't. But I'm your mother. I swallowed the words that wanted to rise. She said it like a warning, but her voice cracked on the word mother. Not with anger, but with guilt. That night, she cried in her bedroom. I could hear the muffled sobs through the wall. It hollowed something out inside me, to know I had caused her that pain, that conflict. And yet, the kiss remained. It had been real. The next day, she wore red lipstick to work. She hadn't in months. I watched her leave and she paused at the door, her hand resting on the knob. I don't regret you, she said without turning around. Then she left. I didn't know what that meant. But that evening when she came home, tired, her blazer wrinkled from leaning on her desk too long, something had changed again. She wasn't angry. Just worn down. He said it again today, she said while unlacing her shoes. Mark. About my clothes. About how I walk. But I'm your mother. I swallowed the words that wanted to rise. She said it like a warning, but her voice cracked on the word mother. Not with anger, but with guilt. That night, she cried in her bedroom. I could hear the muffled sobs through the wall. It hollowed something out inside me, to know I had caused her that pain, that conflict. And yet, the kiss remained. It had been real. The next day, she wore red lipstick to work. She hadn't in months. I watched her leave and she paused at the door, her hand resting on the knob. I don't regret you, she said without turning around. Then she left. I didn't know what that meant. But that evening when she came home, tired, her blazer wrinkled from leaning on her desk too long, something had changed again. She wasn't angry. Just worn down. He said it again today, she said while unlacing her shoes. Mark. About my clothes. About how I walk. I sat cross-legged on the sofa, watching her from behind a book I wasn't really reading. What did you say? I said maybe he should stop staring. I smiled. She didn't. Sometimes I hate being looked at, she said, voice tight. Other times I miss being seen. I see you, I whispered. She looked up. Met my eyes. That was when I knew she felt it too. We didn't kiss again for months. We didn't need to. We lived in a rhythm of tension, of stolen glances, of shared cups of tea held a few seconds too long. My 16th birthday came and went, and I caught her looking at me differently. Not like a mother admiring how her daughter had grown, but like a woman realizing the world had shifted. Scared her. I know it did. She started pulling away. Polite silences replaced laughter. Conversations shortened. We became strangers in the house we once filled with warmth. The more she distanced herself, the more I wanted to pull her back. One evening, I found her on the porch, shivering with a blanket around her shoulders, a half-empty mug of lemon balm tea in her hand. Her expression was vacant, lost. I sat beside her. "What's going on?" I asked. "They're talking," she murmured. "The neighbors. The girls at work. Even my sister. They say things." I stayed silent. "I'm not stupid, Anastasia," she added. "I see how we are together. How you look at me. How I look at you." I turned to her. "Does it matter what they say?" Her voice broke on the edge of a breath. "It matters to me." I reached for her hand. "I'll be quiet. I'll protect us. You don't have to explain anything to anyone. But I'll know." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "You were a little girl in pigtails when I met you. I picked you because you made me feel needed. Loved. And now I still love you," I said, "but not like a child." She looked away. "I can't do this. But you already have." The silence that followed was longer than any we'd shared. Heavy. Full of everything we hadn't said. When she finally turned back to me, her face was streaked with tears. "I don't know how to stop," she said. And then she kissed me again. It was tender. Filled. Like saying goodbye and hello all at once. That night, I lay in bed not knowing what we were. What we would become. But I knew we weren't just mother and daughter anymore. We were something else entirely. After that second kiss, things didn't become easier. They became quieter. We didn't talk about it. We just existed inside the space we created, a world carved out of glances and silences. I'd find her looking at me as she washed the dishes, eyes distant, thoughtful. I'd pass her in the hallway, and our shoulders would brush, and neither of us would move away. At night, we drank tea together on the porch, each sip masking the questions neither of us dared to ask. It was peaceful. It was unbearable. The neighbors noticed. Katie always had a way of drawing attention, her elegance, her calm voice, her composed presence. And now, with me beside her in the garden or leaning against her at the farmer's market, I could feel their stares stretch like shadows. One morning at the store, an older woman tilted her head at us. "Your daughter looks at you like you hung the moon," she said, laughing gently. Katie smiled tightly. "She's just affectionate." The woman nodded, her gaze lingering too long. When we got back in the car, neither of us spoke. The silence felt like splinters. That night, Katie stayed in her room. I pressed my ear against her door but heard nothing. Not even the familiar rustling of her comforter or the click of her mug being set down on the nightstand. I returned to my room, unable to sleep. Around midnight, the hallway light turned on. Her door opened. She stood there, wrapped in her robe, her hair undone, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. Her face was pale. Vulnerable. "I can't sleep," she whispered. I said nothing. Just pulled the blanket back beside me. She lay down, her back facing me. Her breathing was shaky. I reached out and placed a hand gently on her hip, just to say I was there. That I wouldn't move. That I wouldn't ask more of her than she could give. She didn't pull away. We slept like that. Quiet, tangled in warmth and restraint. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. Breakfast was waiting, eggs, toast, a tiny glass of grapefruit juice. A note beside it in her narrow handwriting. "Annie, I'm sorry I keep running. I'm just afraid of what this means. I love you. I love you too much. Too much." That phrase rooted in my chest like an ember, pulsing with every thought. Love isn't supposed to come with a measurement. It isn't supposed to be a verdict. But we both knew this wasn't the kind of love people wrote cards about. It wasn't built for others to see. So we kept it hidden. 4 months. We stopped kissing. Stopped touching. But the intimacy didn't go away. If anything, it grew bolder in its quietness. She would braid my hair before dinner, fingers grazing my neck. I'd sit beside her with my knees tucked under her thigh as we watched the evening news. We lived inside paper walls, pretending they were made of stone. Then one evening, late summer, the air still heavy and fragrant, Katie came home shaken. I was on the back porch reading. She burst through the screen door like someone who had forgotten how to breathe. "I need to talk to you," she said. I sat up, spine straight. "My boss," she exhaled hard. He said something again. About my posture. Said it was too inviting. Can you imagine that? Posture. I stood to reach for her, but she waved me off. "It's not just that," she said, voice trembling. He said, "No wonder people talk about you. You always bring that daughter of yours to the company picnics like she's your..." She stopped, voice cracking. "Like you're not really my daughter." Like he knows. My chest ached. "Katie." "They're watching us, Anastasia," she said. "They're speculating. They see it." "So what?" I asked, stepping forward. "Let them. What do they know?" She looked at me then, really looked. There was such longing in her gaze. And fear. And love. All bound together so tightly it looked like pain. "I can't do this," she said. "Yes, you can." "No," her voice dropped. "There's a difference in age. You're just 19. You're so young. And I adopted you. I raised you. You saved me," I said. "That doesn't make this right." "Doesn't it?" I asked. "You didn't raise me with shame. You raised me with love. With kindness. You told me to listen to my heart. Well, mine beats for you." She backed away like the words hurt. "You don't understand." I stepped closer. "Don't tell me what I understand." And then I kissed her. She didn't move. Her breath caught. I could feel her shaking. "I'll make you tea," I whispered. "Lemon balm. Just like you used to make for me when I was anxious. You'll sit outside. I'll tuck a blanket around you. We'll listen to the crickets. Just be still. We don't need to name this. We don't need to prove anything. We just need to stop hurting." Her eyes shimmered. She nodded silently. So I made her tea. She sat on the porch swing, her knees pulled to her chest, my blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked younger than I'd ever seen her, exhausted by the burden of keeping love in a box it was never meant to fit inside. I sat beside her, no touching. Just presence. She reached for my hand. Held it like something sacred. "Just us," she whispered. I nodded. "Only us." Autumn came like a secret, slow and golden. Leaves fell outside our windows, rustling in ways that reminded me of whispered promises. Our house was still, except for the quiet rhythm Katie and I had slipped into, a kind of careful harmony. We talked about the weather, errands, books. Everything except us. But every word was laced with the knowledge of what we didn't say. We still had our tea every night. Still sat close. Still held hands on the porch when the sky deepened into indigo. It was enough and not enough. Love like this wasn't a wildfire. It was a candle in the dark. Fragile. Sacred. Needing protection. The outside world didn't stop. Questions came. The gossip grew. Someone from Katie's office mentioned seeing us at the park, how I touched her arm too gently, how her eyes followed me like gravity. She tried to brush it off, but I saw it weigh on her like ash. One evening after dinner, she turned to me. "I've been thinking of leaving," she said. "The job. Maybe the city." I froze. "To run. To protect you," she said. "To protect us." I shook my head slowly. "You don't have to run, Katie. Just stop hiding. At least with me." She looked so tired then. Like a bird that had flown too long without landing. "I don't know how to love you and survive it," she whispered. I reached for her hand. "Then let me be the one who keeps us alive." She closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought she might fold again. But instead she said the smallest thing. "Okay." That night I made tea with lemon balm. The smell of it filled the kitchen like memory. I brought it to her where she sat on the porch, and I wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. Then I knelt beside her and laid my head in her lap like I used to when I was small. She stroked my hair. And when I looked up, she smiled. "Do you remember," she said, "the first time I braided your hair?" I nodded. "You said I looked like something from a fairy tale." "You were. You still are." And she leaned down and kissed my forehead, slow, reverent. "I don't know what we are," she said, "but I know this, whatever it is, it's been the most real thing I've ever felt." We stayed like that for a long time. And slowly, we built a life that didn't have to make sense to anyone but us. Katie started working remotely, freelance design jobs from home. She wore soft sweaters and kept her hair tied up most days. I took college classes online. We made our own little world. Sundays spent baking, rainy mornings with jazz on the radio, notes left in the fridge. And in that privacy, our love grew into something unspoken but undeniable. We never kissed in public. Never touched more than necessary when anyone was watching. But the way she looked at me, the way I poured her tea, the way we existed near each other, those were the moments that mattered. She still wrestled with guilt. It never left her fully. "I adopted you," she said once, tears catching on her lashes. "I was supposed to raise you." "Not." I silenced her with a touch to her cheek. "You gave me a life," I said. "Let me give you a home." Katie nodded, broken open. In the end, no one ever really found out. Or if they did, they chose not to say anything. We were careful. We were quiet. And perhaps that's what saved us. We weren't a scandal. We were a secret, kept between two people who had no one but each other. And maybe that's enough. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up before her. I watch her sleep, her chest rising with each slow breath, her hand reaching for mine even in dreams. And I think, what a strange, beautiful thing this is. I was a girl without a family, and I found a woman who didn't know she still needed to be loved. We found each other in a way that defied everything. Time, rules, expectations. And in the quiet, we made a promise. Just us. Only us. Always.